Now, the executive sedan segment isn't quite as popular as it once was, and that's partially because the smaller, more affordable mid-size sedans have gotten just so capable these days. And on the other hand, you could get a very attractive compact SUV for a similar price as any of those. But that hasn't stopped car makers from launching their freshest and latest models in India. Like this, the brand new Hyundai Elantra, which I have here in petrol automatic guise and this rather fetching shade of blue. And just to keep it honest, I've brought along two of the other petrol automatic cars in the segment, the ever popular, ever reliable Toyota Corolla Altis and our old favorite, the Skoda Octavia TSI. Interestingly, all three of these cars use different kinds of automatic gearboxes, a CVT, a torque converter and a DSG double clutch. So the result is not going to be quite as straightforward as you might imagine. Still, we have to pick a winner, so let's get right to it. A quick word on the styling, and really it's all down to what you want your executive sedan to look like. The new Elantra carries over its predecessor's basic sleek shape, but the details are all new, like the hexagonal grille, slim tail lamps and the smart new alloy wheels. It's more mature looking than before, but it's still the sportiest of this lot. The Corolla Altis does have a few bits of flair too, what with its big chrome grille and raked back headlamps, but overall it's an odd mix of aggression and restraint. The Octavia is restrained too, but consistently so. It's neat like a sharp suit and will appeal to those who prefer that certain European subtlety. Whatever you make of the looks, it's arguably the experience from the driver's seat that will be a big part of the buying decision with these cars. So, let's check them out, starting with the newest one. Now, while the exterior of the new Elantra is just as wild and rakish and attention-grabbing as the old cars, that can't quite be said about the interior. Gone is the old V-shaped, vertically aligned dashboard with its angular AC vents, and in its place is a rather staid and European-looking, horizontally aligned dashboard. Quality, however, has taken a huge leap forward, and it's no longer at the same level as lesser Hyundais. It's in a league of its own. So as soon as you step into the Corolla Altis, the first thing you sense is that you're in a rather old school car. And there are some pretty cool elements. I mean, there is a digital clock in the dash and a very old school gated automatic gear selector. Now all this is strictly a matter of taste, but what really can't be argued is that the quality level just isn't as good as the other cars here. There's a lot of hard plastics high up where you can see and feel it, and unfortunately that's just not what you want in a car of this price. Now the Skoda's dash might not be as interesting to look at as the other two, but you cannot fault it on the sensation of quality and luxury that it just exudes so well. The leather feels soft, the switches operate really crisply, and all things considered, this one gets you closest to feeling like you're in a proper luxury car. So all these cars have their own take on the executive interior, but they are petrol automatics and will likely be owner driven. So let's dive straight into the performance. The big news with the new Hyundai Elantra is that it's got a brand new 2-litre petrol engine that makes about 152 horsepower, and that's mated to a 6-speed automatic gearbox in this car. So first impressions of this powertrain are rather good. When you start up, set off, and as long as you aren't driving in a very hurried manner, this engine is smooth, it's refined, and it makes pretty good progress. However, try and ask it to step out of this comfort zone and you'll really start to see the cracks. For one, if you punch down hard on the accelerator, the gearbox fumbles through its ratios before settling on the right one. And as the revs build, that refinement starts to fade away and you hear what this engine is truly about. What is quite interesting though is that this engine comes with 3 driving modes. The sport mode does what you might imagine. It livens up the engine and the gearbox. And that's great if you want to go fast. Now the normal driving mode is a happy compromise between both, but it still feels a little bit too high-strung and a little bit too unrefined. In the city and in traffic, eco mode is the most refined, the shifts are the smoothest, and frankly the one you want to be in. Now the Toyota Corolla Altis continues to be powered by a 1.8-litre naturally aspirated petrol engine. Progress is smooth and there's enough pep off the line. Special mention has to go to the CVT gearbox, which is much better than most of the units we see out there. It's quick to respond to your inputs and there's really not that much of the rubber band effect that you associate with this type of gearbox. However, mash your foot hard down and like the Elantra, a few weaknesses start to show. For one, yes, now you will feel a bit of that rubber band effect where it's more revs than actual progress. And well, yes, the engine does get a bit vocal at the top of its rev range. The other thing is that while the engine itself is quite refined, the car on the whole is not. There's a fair bit of wind and road noise coming into the cabin, and that can be a bit of an annoyance if you plan to use the Corolla as a highway cruiser. Now I'm at the wheel of the Skoda Octavia 1.8 TSI, and oh my gosh, I had forgotten how quick this car is. It's powered by a 1.8-litre turbocharged direct injection petrol engine that's mated to a 7-speed dual clutch automatic gearbox. The result of that is 180 horsepower and 250 newton meters of torque, which is a fair bit more than what either of the other two make. And because it's turbocharged, it makes all of that torque really early on, so you get all the thrust just from the word go. It's phenomenal fun to drive. And the incredible performance is only helped by the quick shifting, quick reacting, super intelligent dual clutch gearbox. You just have to leave it to its own devices and it will do everything just perfectly for you. However, you can go to manual mode with the paddles. But what good is a strong engine if it doesn't have the chassis to match, right? And this is where the previous Elantra wasn't all that great. Now, where Hyundais of old were notorious for their rather bouncy highway manners, this one, I'm happy to report, is a huge improvement. And it feels so much more planted. There's none of that annoying float that you get at high speeds. And even through the steering wheel, you get a much better sense of security when you're going fast. In fact, it has a nice, soft, supple edge that soaks up bumps really well. Yes, you could thank the tall profile tires for this to some extent, but I still think Hyundai has done a phenomenal job of sorting the suspension out. Now, another thing Hyundais of old were not known for was their handling. Sure, they went around corners just fine, but it was the steering that felt loose and numb and left you feeling disconnected from the driving. And I'm happy to say, once again, they've done a much better job with this new Hyundai Elantra. Yes, it's still not the class best, but it feels a lot more connected to the front wheels, a lot more weighted, and it just gives you a much better feeling of security when you're pushing it around corners, and that is a revelation in a Hyundai. Now the Corolla Altis feels a little bit stiffer sprung than the other two, but the benefit of that is that when you're out on the highway, it rides flat and true and gives you a lot of confidence at high speeds. On the flip side, what doesn't give you a lot of confidence is the steering, which doesn't weigh up as nicely as you would have liked at higher speeds. Now at lower speeds, the Corolla's slightly firmer suspension can be felt. It's not a deal breaker, but when you go over rough patches of road or through potholes, you will get tossed around a bit. Now while the steering of the Corolla is quick and accurate, once again, it feels just a little bit too loose, and that kind of robs it of some fun and prevents it from being a truly good handling car. Now most Skoda cars are great highway cruisers and this one is no exception. You will just love taking it out on long drives because of how smooth and flatly it rides at high speeds and how refined the cabin is and just how insulated you are from the outside world. Now if the Octavia rode well out on the highway, it's even better around town. It soaks up bumps and undulations really well and you could even drive it through some bigger potholes without even the slightest of fuss. Amazingly, the Skoda handles really well also. Initially, you might feel that it's a little bigger than the other two cars after you stepped in for the first time, but show it a corner and it will immediately prove you wrong. There is very little body roll and more than anything, this steering is so accurate and well connected and sharp that it really makes you want to push this car harder and harder. Fun as these petrol automatics are to drive, they are still executive sedans, so we do have to look at how good they are when you let the chauffeur take over. Now the back seat of the new Hyundai Elantra is really rather good. I mean, the seat is quite comfortable, it's very softly cushioned, and as you can see I've got enough legroom, although headroom is a little on the short side. What is a bit of an issue is that because the cabin is all black and the windows are really narrow, you do feel a little bit hemmed in. Additionally, because the roofline is so low and the seat is also low, getting in and out of the back seat is a little bit more cumbersome. Now I'm in the Corolla back seat and as you can see I've got plenty of legroom, pretty good thigh support and lots of headroom as well. The better part is that I'm sat quite high up and the windows are big, so there's a good sense of airiness too. A bonus in this car is that the seat has a very slight recline function, so you can adjust it to suit your needs. A small sore point though that it misses out compared to the other cars is that there is no rear AC vent, so you have to rely on the front AC vents to cool the car properly. Now in true Skoda fashion, the back seat is incredibly spacious. I mean, look how much legroom I have, headroom is pretty great too, and the windows are nice and big. Perhaps the central tunnel is a bit wide, that might inconvenience middle seat passengers, and maybe thigh support isn't quite as good as the Toyota Corollas. But overall, I'd have to say this is the best back seat of the lot. By now, a 1-2-3 podium was clearly beginning to fall into place. So, who do you think came out on top? Now these three cars are petrol, automatic, executive sedans, and that means they have to deliver as much from the back seat as they do from the driver's seat. And that is a tall order for any car. It's no wonder that the Toyota Corolla Altis is so popular with buyers. It's a brand that screams reliability, low running costs, and a hassle-free ownership experience. And that's just what the Corolla is. It's a hassle-free car. It does everything you ask of it. But the one thing it just can't do is make you feel special. The interiors lack that premium feel, the plastics aren't as good as the others, and it's not as well equipped. And that really stings when you consider that it's more expensive than the Elantra. Onto the Elantra, it perhaps doesn't have that wow factor that the previous car did because the novelty factor has worn out just a little bit. However, it's a much more mature and rounded car that rides better, drives better, and is better equipped than before. It's still a stunner to look at, and that just makes it so much more appealing. It's a much better car for it. However, there's no arguing that the Skoda Octavia is the best car in this comparison. It does everything just that little bit better than the others, and on top of it all, it just happens to be incredibly fun to drive as well. And yes, while this top-spec Octavia Style Plus is more expensive than the others, we feel buyers of a petrol automatic car in this class won't mind making the stretch, because the Skoda really feels worth it. And if price is really an issue to you, you could move to the lower Ambition Plus trim and not lose out on too much. To drive or to be driven in then, the Octavia TSI Auto is the best of this bunch.